The palace of Velthara was a fortress of shining silver walls and towering spires. It stood at the heart of the alien capital, guarded day and night by elite warriors, the Queen of Velthara. Illyra ruled with calm strength, her people respected. Her feared her enemies and loved her for her wisdom, but no one knew the weight she carried in her heart. The memory of a husband lost many years ago in a war that had torn the galaxy apart. That morning, the throne room was filled with tension. Advisors spoke in hushed voices, giving reports about a recent assassination attempt. The queen sat on her high throne, her silver crown glinting in the light. She listened without showing fear, though inside she felt the danger pressing closer every day. Then the great bronze doors at the end of the hall swung open. The sound echoed through the chamber. All eyes turned, expecting another alien soldier to report in. Instead, a tall human guard stepped through. His black armor was polished, his posture perfect. His eyes scanned the room with a calm, watchful gaze. Queen Illyra's breath caught. Her fingers gripped the armrests of her throne. Her heart pounded in her chest. The man walking toward her looked exactly like him, the same strong jaw. The same eyes she had not seen in decades but could never forget. For a moment, the room seemed to fade. And she was back in the days before the war, standing beside her husband as they planned the future together. The human stopped at the base of the steps. He bowed respectfully, but when he looked up, there was no sign of recognition in his face. "Your Majesty," he said simply. His voice was deep and steady, so much like her husband's that it made. Her hands trembled around the throne room. Whispers began to spread. Advisors leaned to one another, murmuring questions. Was this man an imposter? Was he sent here to unsettle the queen? Or was it something even stranger? Illyra forced herself to stand. "The meeting is dismissed," she said. Her voice was calm, but inside her mind was spinning. Captain Ryan, remain. The guards and advisors hesitated, but her tone left no room for argument. Soon, the throne room was empty, and only the queen and the new human guard stood there. The silence between them was heavy. She walked down the steps slowly, her eyes locked on his face. "You," she said quietly. "What is your name?" "Daniel Ryan, Your Majesty," he answered. He spoke in the human language, but the meaning was clear to her through the translator embedded in her ear. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel Ryan. A name she had never heard before. And yet, his every movement was familiar. The way he stood, the way his eyes flickered toward the windows to check for threats. It was exactly what her husband used to do. "Where are you from?" She asked. "Earth," he said. "I was sent here after the recent attack to join your palace guard." Her heart ached at the word sent, as if he had been delivered into her life by some force beyond understanding. "You have never met me before, have you?" she asked. Daniel looked slightly puzzled. "No, Your Majesty, I haven't." She stepped closer. So close she could see the small scar just above his left eyebrow. Same scar her husband had. A scar earned in the Battle of the Azure Fields. Her breath hitched. She had to know more. But her mind screamed at her not to reveal her feelings too soon. "I will speak to you again later," she said, turning away. "For now, remain in the West Wing and await your orders." Daniel bowed again. "Yes, Your Majesty," when he left. The room Illyra stayed where she was, staring at the empty doorway. Her pulse still raced. This was impossible. Her husband had died long ago. She had seen his ship destroyed with her own eyes. And yet, a human stood before her with his face, his voice, his movements. Somewhere deep inside, a small spark of hope flickered. But so did fear. If this was a trick, it was a cruel one if it was real. Then everything she thought she knew about life and death was about to change. She would find the truth, no matter what it cost. The corridors of the West Wing were quiet. The human guard walked through them slowly, his boots making soft echoes. On the marble floor, Daniel Ryan had served in dangerous posts before. But never in a palace like this. Everything here felt ancient and full of secrets. He had no idea that the Queen herself had ordered him placed here, not out of duty, but out of something far more personal, in her private chamber. Queen Illyra paced slowly. Her mind replayed every detail of the meeting. She had studied the humans. Face in the throne room, searching for differences. Trying to prove to herself that it wasn't him. But the more she thought, the more impossible it seemed. The resemblance was perfect, down to the smallest details that no spy or imitator could. Fake, her chief advisor, a tall alien named Koresh, entered quietly. "Your Majesty, this new human soldier. Something about him troubles the court." Illyra turned sharply. "It troubles me as well," she admitted. "But not for the reason they think." Koresh's eyes narrowed. "Then I will speak plainly. He is dangerous. Dangerous." She repeated, "You think he is here to harm me?" "I think he could be here to distract you," Koresh said, "and that is sometimes worse than harm." The Queen dismissed him with a wave, but his words stayed in her mind. She could not deny the risk, but she also could not deny the strange feeling that pulled her toward the human. Later that evening, she sent for him. Daniel arrived in her chamber, still in his armor. His expression was calm but wary. He knew palace politics well enough to guess that this meeting would not be casual. She offered him a seat, but he remained standing. "Why am I here, Your Majesty?" Illyra studied him in silence for a moment. "You remind me of someone I once knew," she said at last. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. "Someone I loved." Daniel's brow furrowed. "I see. And this someone was human." "Yes," she said. "He was human, but not from your world. He came to mine long before you were born." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I've never been here before now. I don't know who he was." The Queen's eyes searched his face for any sign of deception. She saw none. His voice was steady, his breathing calm, yet every gesture, every flicker of his eyes felt painfully familiar. She asked him questions, simple ones at first: where he grew up, why he joined the guard. The answers were normal, believable. But then she slipped in a question about a long-forgotten battle one her husband had fought in. Daniel hesitated. I don't know why, but I feel like I've heard of that place before," he said slowly. "Azure Fields, that's what you called it?" Her heart skipped a beat. He had spoken the name without her giving it. "Who told you that name?" she asked sharply. "No one," Daniel said. "It just came to me." The Queen sat back, hiding the storm in her mind. This was no ordinary coincidence. She decided then that she would keep him close, no matter what her advisors thought. But outside her chamber, shadows moved. Word of the Queen's private audience with the new humans spread quickly in the palace kitchens, in the training yards. In the council halls, whispers grew louder. Some said the Queen had fallen under human influence. Others feared he was a spy planted to weaken the throne. Daniel, unaware of most of it, returned to his quarters in the West Wing. That night, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood on a battlefield under a red sky, alien ships burning in the distance. Beside him was a woman in silver armor, her face hidden by a battle mask. But when she turned, it was Queen Illyra. Younger, smiling at him, he woke before dawn, his heart racing. He couldn't explain why the dream felt more like a memory than imagination. Meanwhile, in her private study, Illyra stared at an old holographic portrait. It was her and her husband on the day of their coronation. The resemblance to Daniel was undeniable. Her hands trembled as she touched the image. "If it's you," she whispered to the empty room, "why have you come back now?" By morning, the palace of Valthera was buzzing with rumors. Servants whispered in the corridors, Guards spoke in low voices at the gates. Even the advisors, who usually moved with cold dignity, could not help but glance at the West Wing, where the new human soldier had been placed. Daniel walked through the halls with silent confidence, but he could feel the stares. He had served in militaries before and knew when a place was turning against him. Yet here it was different. There was something personal in the way they looked at him, as if he had stepped into the middle of a story he didn't understand. In the council chamber, Queen Illyra listened as her minister spoke. But her mind was elsewhere. She remembered Daniel's words from the night before Azure Fields. The name had rolled off his tongue as if he had spoken it 100 times. How could that be possible? Her husband had been the only human to ever fight there. Your Majesty. Koresh's voice pulled her back to the present. We must discuss the human. Illyra's eyes narrowed. We will not discuss him in public session. The ministers exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen the way she looked at him, and they were beginning to guess too much. Later that day, Daniel trained with the palace guards. He moved with precise skill, his strikes sharp, his defense unshakable. The other soldiers muttered to each other, comparing him to old stories of the Queen's late husband, stories of a warrior who had fought beside her before her rise to the throne. As Daniel finished the training drill, 2 alien guards stepped closer. Human, one of them said with a sneer. You think you're special here? I'm here to do my job. Daniel replied calmly. The other guard leaned in, his voice low. Then do it quietly. Before someone decides you don't belong, Daniel held his ground, staring them down until they walked away. But he made a note in his mind. There were enemies here, and they would not stay quiet for long. That night, he walked past the high windows of the palace and overheard a conversation. 2 officials stood in a shadowed corner, speaking in hushed tones. The Queen is blinded by sentiment. One said, if this human stays, it will destroy her judgment. The council will not allow it for long. The other replied, accidents happen. Even in the safest palace, Daniel's fists clenched. He did not know why the Queen was defending him, but he could feel danger pressing closer. Meanwhile, in her private rooms, Illyra stood before the holographic portrait of her husband again. She traced the image with her fingers, remembering the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his voice, and then she thought of Daniel, the same voice, the same laugh hidden behind his reserved manner. Her heart told her one thing. Her mind told her another. If this was truly her husband, returned in some impossible way, what would it mean for her reign? What would it mean for him? In the Great Hall, the night court was in session. Nobles from across the kingdom had gathered. But Illyra's attention kept drifting toward the door, waiting for the moment Daniel would step in for his assigned post. When he finally entered, her eyes caught his for just a moment. 1,000 unspoken questions passed between them in that glance. Outside the hall, in the torchlit corridors, the palace shadows seemed darker than usual. Somewhere among them, the Queen's enemies were already moving. The whispers were no longer just rumors. They were plans, and Daniel could feel it. The palace was beautiful, but beauty could hide sharp knives. He didn't know yet whether he was here to serve, to survive, or to uncover a truth that had been buried for decades. The Queen sent a discreet summons just before sunset. Daniel was ordered to present himself in the royal dining chamber. Alone, no guards, no advisors, no other guests. The message was polite, but gave no reason. Daniel arrived in his formal guard uniform, polished and precise. The dining chamber was a warm, quiet space compared to the echoing halls of the palace. Gold light from crystal lamps filled the room. The Queen sat at the head of a long table, her silver crown resting lightly on her head. Her eyes followed him as he entered. Sit, she said softly. Daniel obeyed. The first course was brought in by silent servants, an assortment of alien delicacies. Among them was a tall crystal glass of amber-colored liquid. It shimmered faintly under the lights. Daniel's eyes rested on it for only a second before he reached for it. Elira noticed her husband had always chosen that drink first. It was a rare, spiced wine from the desert worlds, something most off-worlders found too strong, yet Daniel sipped it without hesitation. "You like it?" she asked. "It's familiar," he said, frowning slightly, "but I've never had it before." They ate in silence for a while. The queen watched him carefully. Every small movement seemed to pull at her heart. Finally, she decided to begin. "Her test. Tell me," she said. "Do you know of the Battle of Azure Fields?" Daniel paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Yes," he said slowly. "It was. A wide valley, crimson grass, a cold wind that made the armor feel heavier. He stopped abruptly, confusion clouding his face. I've only read about it somewhere," but Elira's pulse quickened. That was no historian's description. That was the memory of someone who had stood there. She leaned forward, and what happened? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. I can see flashes, fire in the distance." "You?" He froze. "Why did I say you?" Before she could answer, the heavy gong of the palace alarm shattered the moment. Servants and guards rushed past the dining room doors. A voice called out "Intruder" in the west wing. Daniel was on his feet in an instant. His hand went to the weapon at his side without thought. Elira followed, her guards moving to shield her. But Daniel pushed forward. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The queen's heart stuttered. Her husband had said those exact words countless times in battle. They reached the west wing in moments. A shadowed figure was scaling the wall toward an open balcony. Daniel didn't hesitate. He moved like a predator swift. Precise, every strike was efficient, every step purposeful. Within seconds, the intruder was disarmed and pinned to the ground. Elira stared. It was the same combat style her husband had used, fluid, almost instinctive. She could remember standing behind him, watching those same movements as he fought to keep her safe. The intruder was taken away, the alarm silenced. Daniel turned to her. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "You fought like a soldier who's trained here his whole life." Daniel frowned. "I don't know why, but this place? These halls. They feel like I've walked them before." She studied him for a long moment, her mind racing. The test had given her more answers than she expected, and yet more questions than she could bear. If he truly carried her husband's memories, then someone or something had made it so. That night, Elira stood alone in her chamber, looking out at the star-filled sky. Somewhere beyond those stars was the truth. And she would find it, no matter how dangerous it became. The palace was quiet after the intruder's capture, but the queen's mind was anything but calm. Elira had seen enough to know that Daniel was no ordinary guard. His instincts, his movements, his words, each one echoed the man she had lost. That night, she summoned her most trusted aide, Captain Vera, a woman who had served her since before the war. "I need you to investigate this human," Elira said in a low voice. "Do it quietly. No one on the council can know." Vera's eyes narrowed. "Do you suspect treachery?" "I suspect the impossible," Elira replied. Vera bowed and left without another word. For the next several days, Daniel went about his duties as normal. But he could feel the air in the palace shifting. Guards who once avoided him now watched. His every move, the advisors, seemed even colder. The whispers in the corridors followed him like shadows. One evening, after a long patrol, he was called to the queen's study. The chamber was dimly lit, the walls lined with ancient star charts and glowing relics. Elira was seated at her desk, her expression unreadable. "I had your records pulled from the central archive," she said. "Your birth, your service, your family, all documented. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you know I'm telling the truth about who I am. I know something else as well, she said, standing. She walked toward him with measured steps. Your DNA matches another entry in our deepest records. Someone who died over 40 years ago. Daniel blinked. That's impossible. Elira's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. It is a perfect match, Daniel. Down to the smallest detail, that man was my husband. Silence filled the room. Daniel searched her face for any hint that she was joking, but there was none. Your husband? He said finally, I don't even know you. I've never been here before. Perhaps not in this life. Illyra whispered, almost to herself. Daniel took a step back, his mind spinning. You think I'm him, reborn, cloned. I don't know what you are, she admitted, but I know what I see. I know what I hear when you speak. I know the way you move when danger comes. He turned away, staring at the stars beyond the balcony doors. This doesn't make sense, he said. Quietly, but I've been having dreams that feel real. I see battles. I hear your voice calling to me. I wake up feeling like I've lost something I can't name. Her breath caught. That was exactly how her husband had described the visions he saw before they first met, before either of them could say more. Vera returned. Her face was pale. Your Majesty, she said. I traced his DNA match through our war archives. There's no doubt it's identical, but there's another detail. You need to hear his genetic markers are aged. Aged? Illyra repeated. Yes, Vera said. They show signs of time displacement, as if his body was out of normal time for decades before he was born. Daniel stared at her. Time displacement. That's not real. It is, Illyra said. Her voice low. We've seen it before. Rare, dangerous, but real. The room felt smaller. The weight of the truth pressed down on all of them. If Daniel had truly been her husband, thrown out of his own time and reborn into another life, then fate had done something cruel and strange. But Illyra also knew something else. The council discovered this. They might see Daniel not as a miracle, but as a threat. And threats to the throne never lasted long. That night, long after Daniel left her study, Illyra stood alone at the balcony. The stars shimmered above, somewhere out there. Time itself had played a trick on them, but whether it was a gift or a curse, she had yet to learn. The Queen's discovery of Daniel's DNA match was kept secret. But secrets in the palace never stayed hidden for long. A few carefully placed ears heard whispers. And soon her political enemies began to weave a plan. In the High Council chamber, far from Illyra's sight, 3 senior ministers met in shadow. The Queen grows reckless. One said, she protects the human like he is more than a soldier. He is more than a soldier. Another replied. He is a danger to her focus if he is allowed to remain. He will change her decisions, perhaps even her loyalty. The third leaned forward, his voice sharp. Then we remove him quietly. An accident? Nothing to trace back to us. That night, while the palace slept, a message was sent to a hidden network of mercenaries. The next day, Daniel was assigned to escort the Queen on a diplomatic visit to the city of Vethra. It was a public event, and Illyra insisted he remain close. The streets were lined with citizens, banners waving in the wind on the surface. It was a day of celebration, but Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong from the rooftops. Unseen eyes followed their movements. The mercenaries moved into position. Their plan was simple: strike fast, leave no witnesses. The attack came in the narrowest street. A sudden blast shook the air, smoke filling the road. The crowd screamed and scattered. In the chaos, shadowed figures leaped from above, blades flashing in the light. Daniel reacted without hesitation. His body moved as if remembering 100 battles. He stepped in front of Illyra, blocking the first strike with his forearm. Pain shot through him, but he pushed forward, driving the attacker back. 2 more came at them. Daniel fought with a strange mix of human military training and something. Far older, his strikes were fluid, his defense instinctive. Lyra saw flashes of her husband in every movement. One blade found its mark, cutting deep into his side. Daniel staggered but didn't fall. He pulled Lyra behind him, his voice low and urgent. "Stay with me." Lyra's guards finally broke through the smoke, clashing with the mercenaries. The attackers fled into the alleys, leaving Daniel on. One knee, blood pooling beneath him. She knelt beside him, her hands pressing against the wound. "Hold on," she said, her voice breaking. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the chaos around them disappeared. His lips moved. And he whispered a name, her old name, the one only her husband had ever used. A name she had not heard in over 40 years. Tears burned her eyes. "Where did you hear that?" she asked. "But he was fading. From you," he murmured. His voice weak. "Always from you." Her heart clenched. She could not lose him again. Not now. Not after everything. She shouted for her guards. "Get the royal healers, now." They carried him back to the palace, Lyra walking at his side the entire way. Her hand never left his. In her mind, she replayed the moment he had spoken her name. It was not a mistake, not a coincidence, that night, as Daniel lay unconscious. In the healer's wing, Lyra stood outside, staring at the closed doors. Her mind was no longer torn between doubt and belief. She knew the truth, no matter what science or time had done to him. Daniel Ryan was her husband, but knowing the truth was one thing. Keeping him alive in a palace full of enemies was another. For 3 days and nights, Daniel drifted between pain and silence. The healers worked without rest, using every medicine and device they had. Queen Lyra never left the healer's wing. She sat by his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest every time his breathing faltered. Her heart clenched on the morning of the 4th day. His eyes opened. For a moment, he seemed confused, as if waking from a dream. Then his gaze found her. "Lyra," he whispered. She leaned closer. Taking his hand gently, "You remember my name? I remembered it before I knew you," he said, his voice weak, but sure. "I've seen you before, in dreams, in places I don't understand." Her throat tightened. "Then it's time you heard the truth." She told him everything, the resemblance, the way he moved, the way his voice matched her husband's. She told him about the DNA match, about the records of a man who died 40 years ago, but who stood before her now. She told him about the old battles, the memories he could not have. Yet did Daniel listen without interrupting. His expression shifted from disbelief to deep thought. When she finished, there was silence between them. The kind of silence heavy with choice. "I don't know how it's possible," he said finally, "but I believe you. These dreams, these feelings, they're not just mine, they're ours." Lyra's eyes glistened. "If that is true, then fate has brought you back to me. But the palace will never accept it easily. The council will see you as a threat. My enemies will see you as a target. Then let them see me," Daniel said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I've stood in the way of danger before. I can do it again." She laughed softly through her tears. "You haven't changed." When the healers allowed him to stand again, Lyra called for a private ceremony in the palace gardens. No advisors, no ministers, only a handful of loyal guards. The night sky stretched wide above them, the stars shining bright. She stood before him without her crown, without the heavy robes of state, just Lyra, not the queen. He stood without his armor, the wound at his side still healing, but his stance strong. "I lost you once," she said, her voice low. "I will not lose." You again, no matter what the galaxy says, no matter what the council decides. Daniel stepped closer. Taking her hands, then I'll stay, not just as your guard, but as whatever I was meant to be for you, whatever I've always been, under the starlight. She kissed him, not the formal kiss of royalty, but the kiss of someone who had waited. Decades for this moment. From that night forward, Daniel never left her side. The palace still whispered, the council still doubted, but none dared move openly against him. His presence at her side was a reminder that some bonds went beyond politics. Beyond time, there were still no answers to how he had returned. No proof of why fate had bent the rules for them, but as Alira walked with him through the moonlit gardens, she knew the truth in her heart. Sometimes, love does not end, it waits. Hidden in the shadows of time, waiting for the right moment to return, and when it does, not even the power of kings, the will of councils, or the weight of years can keep it away.